WHNU, Boulder, Denver, 88.5 FM, and 1390 AM. Stay tuned for a very special program. I'm Duncan Campbell, and we're going to have a special Living Dialogues program with members of Rising Voices, Indigenous Wisdom, and Climate Change.
Rising Voices is different because there is a sharing of knowledge across a wide range of Indigenous communities.
As our brother and good friend Kalani says, hey, some minds are always better than one mind.
It's an opportunity for people from many different backgrounds to come together to have a conversation about how they might build partnerships.
What we need to know is not what more information our communities need to come to believe in global warming, but instead, what more information do we need to know and how to adapt?
Why Rising Voices? Because everyone is ponying up on tasks that will outlive them, and they get that. They know that it's their responsibility to give back and to create that pathway for the next generation of leadership to take care of that banner forward.
And we're learning about what's happening from the people that it's happening to. We're not just reading about it or watching it on TV. And it makes you want to do more, to be more engaged.
I don't think you would find too many Inuit that would say that the ice is not getting less, and it's so obvious from satellite pictures.
What have been best practices with other cultures? Many communities know their culture, but they don't necessarily know all the practices that have worked in other climates and other environments. So sharing of that sort is what Rising Voices has allowed.
And there's a positivity about the conversation and an encouraging manner that you feel inspired.
Bringing not only this holistic approach, but bringing a new level of understanding.
What we're trying to do is to create a new vocabulary that brings Western science and Indigenous knowledge together on the same playing field, same credibility, same legitimacy, and now develop together a language that allows us to communicate this shared knowledge.
And we move in different paths and different streams, but guess what? Those streams merge, they converge, and when they do, something new can emerge out of that.
I'm Duncan Campbell. Welcome to Living Dialogues. It's a real treat to have friends of mine here who have been involved with Rising Voices for the last 3 years, and it's taking place right here in the heart of science and climate science with the National Center for Atmospheric Research, UCAR, and people coming from around the country representing Indigenous wisdom.
The 4 questions that the UN asked the body of 3,000 scientists around the world: is climate change real? Is there a human fingerprint on it? Are there things we can do to mitigate the causes of climate change? And how do we adapt to those conditions that we can't mitigate? And those answers of the first 2 are purely scientific. I mean, where do you put the thermometer to get the global warming temperature of the entire globe? It's a lot of science involved, and we trust that the scientists have done that in peer-reviewed ways and have come up with good answers. So is there a human fingerprint on the pollution, on the causes of climate change? Yes, there is. The greenhouse gas emissions are piling up, causing the planet to warm. Are there things to mitigate? That gets very political because that involves vested interests of those in the production of greenhouse gas emissions, and a lot of denial took place in that realm. But the last question, physical scientists, climate scientists were asked about how will we adapt to it? What are the human behavioral strategies? And that's not their area. They've got nothing in that realm. But they came back to the UN and they said, you need to go home and talk to your local people and talk to your indigenous peoples to see how we can begin to adapt to a changing, very rapidly changing world.
And when you look at the definition of science in general, our ancestors have been practicing science for thousands of years. The descendants that exist today wouldn't be here today if we weren't able to transfer that knowledge, duplicate, hypothesize, experiment.
Some of these communities who've been living there for thousands of years before anyone else ever came, they were there and learning how to live in this environment. And as it's changed over those centuries, they've continued to adapt to it. And so how have they done so? Why not turn to them for some of those answers?
Because we need to draw on the ancient knowledges, the wisdom that resides with people who understand that knowledge emerges out of this sort of symbiotic relationship that peoples have had with places for hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years, or as we might say often in native traditions, from that place before time, before we started counting days. They understand that part of the problems we've created in the world is this sort of misguided notion that there's one best way of doing things, that there's one answer to all problems. People don't want the best practices, they want the best practice. The miseducative dichotomy of the Western tradition, where we think that there's some tension, some conflict between nature and culture, is something that is completely foreign to indigenous thinking, to native thinkers. We understand that our cultures were emergent out of these symbiotic relationships. If we could reconnect the biological, the ecological diversity of the planet with the cultural diversity that we need so that we can live well in those places, I think we could address many of the most pressing problems we face on the planet today.
This is going to be the turning point. We are now, for the first time in history, from generation to generation, Mother Earth is being passed down in a worse condition than she had been previously. And as I'd like to consider myself a speaker for my next generation, we are ready. We are ready for that call of action. We are prepared to stand up and rise to the challenges that face us. We will not fail you, and we are aware of what is happening, and we are ready to talk about a solution. We would like to thank, of course, Kalani Souza and the mentors that are present, Dr. Wildcat, the elders that are in the room. I would personally like to thank Dr. Tusi for the conversation we had last night. I would also like to say I am aware, and I am very, very grateful for the mentorship that I've had and the opportunities that we've all had. And this is a wonderful opportunity for any youth. And thank you so much, every single one of you.